1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Well, good afternoon. Since my first day in office, I have dedicated myself to standing up and protecting Kentuckians who have been denied justice. We fought for human trafficking victims, for children who have been abused, for people whose rape kits had not been tested, and for many Kentuckians who have otherwise been scammed or harmed. For far too many Kentuckians, justice has eluded them. And in some cases, the reason that justice doesn't come to many victims is that our state doesn't have the tools or the laws that will allow us to seek justice for them. So today, I'm joined by Representative Jim Wayne, Representative Jeff Donahue, Representative Joni Jenkins, and and Representative Dennis Keene, along with Layla Cashin from the KSAP program, who want to remedy this gap, that want to make sure that we have the tools in this state to seek justice for everyone. Representative Donahue is pre-filing legislation that would allow the Office of the Attorney General to petition the Kentucky Supreme Court for what's called a multi-jurisdictional or even a statewide grand jury. Those are for cases involving crimes that span multiple jurisdictions and counties throughout the state. This is the type of legislation that was recently highlighted by the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office's use of a statewide grand jury to investigate abuse and alleged abuse in a religious institution. But it's important to note that this statutory fix, while it would allow a similar investigation, is not just about that issue. This step is necessary for far-reaching, deeply rooted, and sometimes institutional child abuse, human trafficking, public corruption, and drug trafficking activity. The legislation provides us another tool to fight chronic criminal activity that occurs across the Commonwealth. Put simply, our criminals don't stop at our jurisdictional borders. Don't stop committing crimes simply because it would switch from one Commonwealth attorney to another. We have to have the same tools to investigate these criminals as they're able to use to commit crimes across Kentucky. So this law would specifically provide a provision where our office can petition the Kentucky Supreme Court, who would then have to agree that we can convene a special grand jury to investigate crimes or criminal conspiracies on a multi-jurisdictional basis. The Attorney General would designate to the court what county or counties, how large that it needs to be. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court would then appoint a supervising circuit court judge from one of the designated counties that would impanel and ultimately oversee the grand jury. The special grand jury would then be able to advance the investigation in each of the jurisdictions, in each and every area throughout the state that the conspiracy or crime is occurring. While this will allow statewide investigations, any cases will still be prosecuted locally. Primary jurisdiction to prosecute will remain with the local prosecutors in each affected jurisdiction. This gives us the opportunity to truly investigate and stop once and for all institutional activity and or drug, human trafficking, or crime rings that are operating statewide. We would no longer have the problem of shutting down half of a crime ring while the other half is operating and continuing to victimize folks in a separate jurisdiction across Kentucky. While we are pushing this step, we are also doing everything we can to prevent crime and especially child abuse from happening in the first place. My Office of Child Abuse and Human Trafficking Prevention and Prosecutions has trained more than 500 people working with organizations that serve more than 102,000 youth. They work with them on how to protect children, what the right policies and procedures are that must be in place. We've partnered with Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky to host this and other trainings. And my team and PCAC would be happy to provide those trainings to any institution that would like them. We are at the beck and call for anyone who wants to better protect our children. To request a training, you may contact Allison Taylor, Executive Director of my Office of Child Abuse and Human Trafficking Prevention and Prosecution at allison.taylor@ky.gov. Finally, if you are the victim of a crime, if you are the victim of abuse, call my office. Call me at 800-372-2551. With or without this legislation, we want to seek justice for you. On an individual level, we can seek justice for you. If you've been harmed, let us help. Let us stop the conduct that led to that harm and prevent it from happening to anyone ever again. And whether it's been years or whether it's just been days, let us seek justice for you. That's how we stop this activity from occurring again and make sure we build the type of Commonwealth where no child and no person is ever harmed. We need this legislation. It is the next step to ensuring our children and every Kentuckian is safer and that we can shut down certain types of crime once and for all. I'm now going to introduce Representative Jeff Donahue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank each and every one of you for being here today. What we have here is a piece of legislation that's been demonstrated throughout the country to be sensible, and it's an honor and a privilege to carry this sensible legislation, and I hope that it's going to be a bipartisan co-sponsor that we can get this moved forward. What we have here is a piece of legislation that, like I said, makes sense, but it's an opportunity to reach the unreachable, and we haven't been able to do that. And so what this does is that not only to pick at something or an issue or a problem that we may have, it's a situation where we can actually stop it in its tracks. And so once again, I'd like for you to carry that message with you. We're going to be able to reach the unreachable now, and it's good sense legislation. And I encourage my counterparts in the House, and I'm honored to be able to carry this along with my Representative Jim Wayne and Representative Al Gentry. And I think it's going to be a good day in the Commonwealth when we pass this legislation. So thank you all for coming.
Great. Jim?
Well, good afternoon. I'll speak as a legislator, but also as a Catholic. What we have in the Catholic Church right now is a major crisis of trust. We cannot trust our leaders, and I think this is admitted by our leaders. And what this legislation will do is give us an opportunity as a society to make sure that everything is known about the history of sex abuse in the Catholic Church. Now, the legislation is not focused just on the Catholic Church. It's much broader than that. But we know that what sparked this legislation was the Pennsylvania report, and that was the initiative for us to begin working with Attorney General Beshear's office to craft this legislation. In talking with the bishop of the Archbishop of Louisville, or in communication with him, and also in communication with Bishop Stowe in Lexington, what I realize is that there is an attitude that says we're not being trusted by our flocks. And this will contribute to rebuilding that trust. Because what the bishops are doing right now is self-reporting based on what's called the Dallas Charter of 2002. When the major crisis exploded in 2002, the bishops all got together in Dallas, Texas, and they developed a very good document called the Dallas Charter, which requires audits by outside agencies of the records and an examination of every aspect of the history of abuse in each diocese. The Archdiocese of Louisville, and I assume the other 3 dioceses in our state, have all done that type of self-reporting. But self-reporting doesn't work now. You have to have all the records subpoena, all the records available to law enforcement agents. And I think the bishops are beginning to recognize that. To rebuild the trust, we need to entrust the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the Attorney General, to go into all the files and pull them out and find out, as they did in Pennsylvania, what the history has been and whether or not anything is being covered up right now. That in itself, that cooperation by the bishops and the chanceries, I think, will go a long way to helping them restore confidence in their people regarding their leadership. So I highly support this legislation. I'm glad that our legislators here are going to help carry it. We're going to ask the chairs of each judiciary committee, the Senate and the House judiciary chairs, to have a hearing on this before January, so that we can have this jump-started for the January session. And I'm just really pleased that we have someone of the integrity of Jeff Donahue who's going to carry this I won't be around in January to carry it, but Jeff's going to be there, and I'll be cheering from the sidelines.
Thank you. Representative Jenkins.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm here today not only as a legislator, but also someone who has worked as a victim advocate for many years. And for many of our victims, especially of sexual assault or other assaults, there is validation in being able to have your voice heard in a courtroom. They want to be believed and to be respected in that arena. So I think this is just one more step that General Beshear has done to create a victim-centered prosecution and investigation here. We know from current events that many times people do not disclose their abuse because they feel like they will not be respected and validated. So I think here in Kentucky and across the nation, we need to say, you have a place, you will be believed, and we need you to come forward and tell your stories. Thank you so much, General Beshear.
All right, we appreciate everyone being here today. We so greatly appreciate these legislators for stepping up, recognizing the gaps that we have in our law, and ensuring that we will have the tools going forward, again, to seek justice on behalf of everyone. Any questions?
General, do you have an example of a case that you had that you wish you had this law in place that you weren't able to prosecute as fully as you could have?
Well, I think what we see in part of the example, let's say from addressing Kentucky's rape kit backlog, can really inform us that justice isn't just when a criminal has harmed two people in two separate jurisdictions. Getting a conviction for one of them and saying that the person's going away for a long time and that's justice, it's not. That second person deserves that same conviction as well. Their crime is just as important. And having their case pushed, having their case moved through the legal system, I think is an important part of healing and of justice. And this would give us the opportunity, if we had that serial rapist, and we know they exist, to investigate all of those crimes, potentially at the same time, across those jurisdictions. I think maybe one of the other examples that we can all see and understand would be the concept of a human trafficking or a drug trafficking ring, where you might have 4 or 5 leaders that are operating throughout the state, but only 2 of them may be operating, say, in Jefferson or Fayette or Franklin County. If you convene the grand jury right now, and the method we have in one of those counties, yes, we can get the 2 that are operating in those jurisdictions, but we have significant problems prosecuting without calling an entirely separate grand jury and conducting almost separate investigations the other 3 of that 5-person conspiracy ring. This lets us address and stop crime at a very high level, while at the same time each local prosecutor gets to seek that justice in the locality where the crime occurred. I think it's a common sense, absolutely nonpartisan, efficient approach to seeking justice.
Speak of nonpartisan.
Yes.
Would you use this to do like public corruption investigations of, say, state lawmakers or other officials in power?
We don't see examples right now where that would come into play, but there's certainly public corruption that can occur across jurisdictions. It would probably be actions by a single individual in multiple jurisdictions. Certainly if we had a public official that was stealing state or federal funds in multiple jurisdictions, you could see this being used there, but we don't have an example in front of us right now.
One of the hardest things for victims is to testify in front of their accuser. So since
Yes.
you're having this statewide indictment, why not, I get that you want the locals to be able to prosecute it, but why not have a centralized place so the victims, if they are victims in multiple places,
Right.
don't have to confront their accuser twice or 3 times?
Well, any victim should only still have to testify once in the locality where that crime was committed on that individual victim. But we would have to have multiple proceedings, and that's because there are some constitutional implications about how jurisdiction is provided to our Commonwealth attorneys, and when and where the Attorney General can come in. And there's also some constitutional limitations on the actual indictments, and we're trying to respect those limitations and get a legal tool that will serve us to the full extent of the law in fully investigating and having all these ready for prosecution. And that's also so that victim doesn't have to wait through 2, 3, or 4 different proceedings. That those would all be going on, not simultaneously, but if they're investigated correctly and then pushed one after another in a very speedy fashion.
General, since the Supreme Court's involvement, have you spoken to Chief Justice Minton about this and get his thoughts on it?
We've touched base with AOC as an organization. Right now with everything that's pending in front of the Supreme Court, we don't feel like it's appropriate to reach out and to have that conversation at this moment. But AOC as an institution is aware of it, and I'm sure in the proper course we'll hear from the Supreme Court. But notice that the way that this is set up has oversight. It has oversight in the very beginning, where the Supreme Court has to say yes to creating the special grand jury. It has oversight in that a specific circuit court judge is appointed to oversee the grand jury. It has oversight in that we have to go back to that circuit judge to extend the grand jury after certain time periods. And that's so that we know that the investigation is continuing and isn't allowed to simply sit. So while we are pushing for this tool because it's needed, the legislation itself provides significant checks on how that authority is used.
I noticed they're allowed to meet for up to 180 days and one 90-day extension if the chief signs off on it. Is there any provision for a second extension, perhaps?
We believe that the law as drafted allows multiple 90-day extensions, and that's important because if we look at the Pennsylvania proceeding, it actually was initiated by the prior Attorney General. The current Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, when he came into office, that grand jury was already meeting. And so that shows you that this isn't about a single Attorney General. It's about the ability of the office to fill the gaps, to step in and to stop statewide criminal or multi-jurisdictional criminal activity. And the majority of the use of this tool will be under another Attorney General. We're here, I'm here because it's the right thing to do.
Is your office currently investigating instances of sexual abuse that occurred within the Catholic Church, and to what degree are those investigations being hampered or delayed until you can get this legislation passed?
While we can't talk about any active investigation, and I hope you can understand the reasons why, we are committed to seeking justice for anyone who comes to this office and alleges that a crime occurred. And I can say since the news first broke from Pennsylvania, we have been contacted by various folks about what they believe may or may not, what they believe has happened, about the need for this tool, but also by folks who deserve justice individually. So it's very important to know that just because we don't have this tool yet doesn't mean that we or local prosecutors or local police can pursue justice for that individual, because they can and they should in every single instance.
Do you think you'll be able to convince the legislature to go along with this, given that at the moment the legislature is controlled by Republicans, and I know Governor Bevin and a lot of his allies have leveled public corruption accusations at you? I know you've dismissed that as being politically motivated, but if this statewide grand jury would have that public corruption component to it, do you think that there might be some skepticism from the Republican leaders about giving you this option?
Well, unfortunately, we have seen that bills that aren't partisan at all, our truckers against trafficking legislation that's been passed in red states, blue states, and purple states, different laws, whether Joni, you sponsored them or we've pushed them to better protect our children, that many of those haven't even received a hearing, despite there being nothing political about them whatsoever. Child abuse doesn't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. It traumatizes that child and that family regardless. We better be able to rise above any of that, any rancor and any partisanship, to do what we have to do to seek justice for those that need our help the most. And it would be shameful, absolutely shameful, for people to consider, to not consider passing this bill simply because of partisan grounds. The people of Kentucky demand better than that. Anybody else?
Can I answer that too?
Yes?
I think, and again, I'll speak as a practicing Catholic, the priests, the good priests, are outraged at the sewage pit that the Catholic Church is finding itself in right now. So I think you'll find that the outrage is the priests from the pulpit in our parish are asking us to channel our outrage in positive ways. And I think this is a positive way. The day after our priest gave a spellbinding homily on the crisis in Pennsylvania and the crisis with Cardinal McCarrick, he in fact said from the pulpit, I am angry, but I'm not going to just be angry, I'm going to actually do something. And he encouraged all of us to get out and to do something to change this mess. And so the next day is when I contacted General Beshear's office, and we started talking about this, and he'd already been thinking about it. So I think what you'll find is once the word gets out, especially among the Catholic community, the Catholic people in the pews and the good priests and the good bishops will all get behind this and say, this is what we need to restore credibility in the Holy Roman Catholic Church.
Anything final?
May I?
Yes, absolutely. Anything?
Here's what I would like to say. You know, I would think that I have faith in this legislative body, okay? And I hope that they don't prove me wrong. It's the right thing to do. Not only is it something, if we pass it, that the current Attorney General can use as a tool, but the next Attorney General, whoever that may be, or he or she should be, they'll have this tool. So it's the right thing to do, and I hope that our legislators, I'm putting our faith in our legislative body, in the House and the Senate, that we will do the right thing.
Thank you all very much.